Hello,
Okay.
and welcome to Adventures with ADHD Season 2, where we spend an hour or so, probably less, don't worry, don't run away, shining the spotlight on neurodivergent folk, finding out their stories and what works for them. Today, I'm so happy to introduce you to Kate Laine Toner. Kate, thanks for being here today.
It's such a pleasure. I'm really quite excited to be here. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So, what we'll do, Kate, we're just going to have a chat, okay, and find out more about you and your journey to discovery, okay?
That
So,
sounds great.
Kate, where are you from and what do you do?
Well, to cut a long story short, I'm originally American and I've been in the UK for 21 years, and I currently live just outside of Bristol in North Somerset. And I I always say I do all autism all the time. So I'm autistic, my daughter's autistic, I work in autism. So in 2012, I started a brilliant charity called Bristol Autism Support that provides support for parents who've got autistic children. And off of that, I started doing training, autism training, corporate training, and then also parent support training. I've written a book for Jessica Kingsley Publishing, which is autism specialist publisher. That's coming out next year. So it's so all, as I say, all autism all the time.
Yeah,
And that's so it's sort of like a never ceasing autism stream in my life.
yeah, so you're kind of living it, breathing it day in, day out.
Yeah, yeah, for better or for worse. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my life.
great. What's the book called? What should we look out for next year?
The book is called Where Do I Start? And there's a second part to it, something like a guide to the emotional journey of autism for parents and care. Long title, actually. Where do I start is what to look for, and that's coming out in sort of May, June of 2023. And it's the guide I wish I had when my daughter was tiny and I was concerned that she was autistic. It's really kind of everything you need to know right now, sort of on the emotional side of raising an autistic child, without going too much into it. Essentially, parents of autistic children, they don't come into the autism world as enlightened beings, understanding disability and not being ableist and understanding what it means to have an autistic child. So this book is kind of like the fast track of getting from being, well, quite frankly, scared as parents of autistic children who are concerned their child's autistic are, to being confident and not worrying about it and understanding that there are many gifts to autism as well.
Yeah, which we'll talk about some of that today, some of the gifts. So that book sounds amazing, and
Thank you.
how lovely to have that. And you said that people don't just know, do they? Parents don't just
They
know.
don't know. They don't know, and it's quite hard because there's a lot of negative talk in the adult autistic community about not saying parents are scared and not saying, "Oh, are you worried your child is autistic?" But parents are worried. That's what they are. They don't come in and say, "Oh, autism. That sounds great." But because society says autism is bad, autism is negative, autism is scary, autism is terrible, and autism is all these terrible things. And even though awareness has shifted massively in the last 10 years, and now we've got loads of television shows with autistic characters and films and books, and autism is more around us. There's still that negativity. There's still that, if there's a shooting in a school, oh, the boy was autistic, and that's like the headline: autistic boy kills 12 people or whatever. It's that negativity that society presents us with all the time, and we don't even realize it until autism comes into our lives and we think, oh, it's really bad. This is a really bad thing. I'm going to be really scared. Do you know what I mean? So a guide that helps people see that it's not all that. Sometimes it's, that what I say is that autism isn't scary. It's the things around autism that are scary: lack of support and inability to get help for your child. Those things are difficult. Autism itself is just a condition. It's like any condition. It's just a condition. It's not to be feared. It's something to be worked through.
Yeah, great, brilliant. I can't wait to see it. So,
Oh, thanks.
tell me a bit about your journey to kind of discovering that you're neurodivergent.
Yeah, well, my daughter was diagnosed 10 years ago. So my journey kind of really started then. I started to realize, I mean, that was when she was 2, and I started realizing she was probably about 15 months old that she was autistic. There's just a lot of traits there. She's quite she has very high support needs. She's got a lot going on, my daughter. So we realized really early on that she was autistic, and we went through the diagnosis process with her. And then very shortly after that, so that was 2012, very shortly after that, sort of like 2013, 2014, I came across a brilliant article. It's still out and about. This lady called Samantha Craft, and she did a list. It says it's a list, but it's actually a set of lists in one sort of blog post about traits of Asperger women. Obviously, we don't use the term Asperger's anymore, but this was many years ago when we did.
Yeah,
and I read this post, and I felt like it was like a sort of like hairs on the back of your neck going up kind of moment. I felt like this person was looking into my life and writing about me. It was so weirdly spot on and so detailed, and like all these different traits that she talked about. And it's just all obvious things like really being a bit of a loner, being socially awkward, being kind of in your own world sort of stuff. I mean, it's a very long post, but and that was like really really life-shaking for me. It really made me think. It made me realize, and I thought, wow, that is me. And I could look back on my life and see how that had impacted my whole life, you know. And so I went for an assessment, and to be honest, I didn't get a diagnosis. I always say I didn't get diagnosis because I masked the entire time I was there. It was a new situation for me. I didn't know how to act, so I just pretended, you know, to be sociable. Well, I am sociable, but in the context of the assessment, I didn't go in like acting autistic, if you see what I mean, like, oh, I'm miserable, not that that's autistic, but I didn't go in with a clear sign to those people who were assessing me that this is an autistic person. So I went in at the time, I just started, sort of not too far off, started my charity. So I felt, well, I'm in the autism field and you're in the autism field, you assessors, let's talk about autism. I was like really excited to meet these people, which is kind of weird looking back, but I, you know, just sort of like chatted my way through the assessment, and they said, no, you're too sociable and too self-aware to be autistic. It's ridiculous, isn't it? It really is.
And you know, autistic people are some of the most self-aware people I know. We're
painfully self-aware.
Yeah. So it just shows. I mean, I had a similar experience when I went for my autism assessment over 10 years ago. And you do kind of go in with that trust and thinking, yeah, we're all on the same page here. But oh my God.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Because
I thought, I'm so autistic, they'll just see that, you know, and I don't know if it's ironic or what the word would be, but it was the women were, the assessors were women as well, two women assessors. And the thing that upset me as well is that about a month before that, I'd been in a very poor mental health place. I had left a job that was really bad for me. I was in a really bad place. And I really feel that if I had my assessment then, I'd have gotten a diagnosis, because they could have said, oh, this is how autism's impacting on this person's life. She's depressed or she's anxious or whatever. Whereas when I went, I was in a much better place. I'd left that job, life was turning around, and I was in a happy place. So I couldn't possibly be happy and autistic, which is just really sad. And it had a major impact on me, because I felt like I couldn't then go around saying I'm autistic, because I didn't have that sort of like certificate. I didn't have the sort of rubber stamp of you are an autistic person. And I felt really uncomfortable about it. And what I also found was, when I talked to people about it, because I'm a very capable person, I do loads of things all the time. I'm really busy all the time. I'm really prolific producer of all stuff, you know, writing and training and all kinds of things. People just didn't believe me. They just didn't believe that I was autistic. To this day, people don't believe I'm autistic. I think some people think I'm just saying it. I don't know why I would just say that, but they don't believe that, and they didn't believe it then. However, although they didn't believe me, they did start to treat me differently, and they did start to treat me like perhaps I couldn't really do the job that I'd been doing for a few years in the charity. And that was a really difficult time. There was about 2 years where I felt like a fraud, really. I was constantly questioning myself, am I, these professionals say I'm not autistic, maybe I'm not, maybe I was just having a bad day, or maybe well, I don't know, maybe that was just part of my life. Or but then the more I knew in myself, in yourself, in your soul, when you're neurodivergent, there's something that's not quite right. And I realized that, in sort of looking on Twitter and other things, realized that in the adult autism community, self-diagnosis is a thing. And that was like a gift, really, from me, from the universe, that I could say, I am autistic. I proudly identify as autistic. And I sort of drew a line in the sand under it, like, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm autistic. I'm not going to worry about whether I've got a diagnosis. And I've never looked back since. And so I've been very proudly out as autistic for sort of 8 years or so now. Yeah, since whenever that was, and I sort of came to that realization. And then about 6 years ago, I went for my ADHD assessment, which was interestingly far more straightforward, far more clear cut. Went in, had that, was done, got the diagnosis. And it was interesting. It's interesting being a person with both of those things. I was thinking that this morning when I was making sure I had the Zoom link for this podcast, and knowing, like, checking my time and making sure. And I thought, it's like sometimes the autistic side of me, which is really punctual and organized, really battles with the ADHD side of me, which is more chaotic, more all over the place, more kind of like doing 12 things at once, which is quite funny, really. But I think knowing I had ADHD, that was a huge benefit to me. But then life really did make sense. Knowing both of those things, knowing I'm autistic, knowing I have ADHD, those things just put all my life into focus, and it didn't make everything better, but made things clear and helped me find strategies to live, really, and be successful.
Fantastic. And it is life-changing, isn't it? Knowing yourself, understanding yourself, and having been through, difficult times with mental health and coming out the other side. I mean, and really looking through life through a different lens. And I don't know about you, but I'm so much more compassionate with myself, so that I know I have limitations and I can't just be like everyone else. I'm still coming to terms with that, but amazing. And when you say about autism and ADHD, do you find they can kind of cover each other up as well?
Yeah, a little bit, because I think on the autism side, I've got masking. I'm a champion masker. I always have been my whole life. I've always chameleoned my way into, all sorts of awful relationships and good relationships as well, and jobs and friendships. And I think because I'm that sort of champion masker, that's why people don't see they don't see my neurodivergence as a whole, because I am like that. It's really cliched now, but I am like that duck that's gliding along the surface and their feet are paddling, like mad underneath. It's what I'm like. But most people will never see that. They only see the gliding serenely thing. And I think that the gliding serenely is the autism and the paddling madly is the ADHD. So that they kind of like go together in a way. But yeah, I suppose it is the case that they hide each other in a way. Yeah. Because like I say, the autism side is far more organized and punctual and gets things done, and has a precise sort of way, kind of, almost too perfectionistic at times. And the ADHD side is like, let's do it now. Let's go. I've got this idea. Let's buy this thing. Let's go on this course.
Yeah.
And that's all in like 3 minutes, let's do all this stuff,
Yeah. It's sometimes I just think about, you've got those two sides, and when you can kind of channel them and manage them, that's when you get the sweet spot. I find it's like, yes, I can be organized. Yeah, I can be organized, can be spontaneous, and kind of merging those two things together is where the magic happens, I think.
I completely agree. And I think also, and I think it's quite important for neurodivergent people in general to understand that, and understand that if it's possible to be self-employed, that is where the magic happens, because I know for myself, I could never work in an office for a person again. I just do not operate like that at all. It's been a disaster every single time. And for me to be able to do what I need to do, I can, I can work in a very hyper-focused way for sort of 10 hours solid on one thing. And then the next day I might be brain dead and I think, oh, I'm going to sit on the sofa and not read a book, I'm not going to do anything today. And I had this last Thursday where I woke up with all these plans. My partner lives in Cheltenham, and I had got up on Thursday morning to come back, and I had all these plans in the car and thinking, I'm going to do this. And then I got home, it was an hour drive, and I got home and I sat down and nothing was happening. There was nothing in there at all. And I thought, oh, well, that's what's going to happen today. I'm not going to do these things. So it's nothing. There was nothing deadline driven that I had to do. And so I did just read a book, or sometimes those days is when I listen to like business podcasts, or I watch like business training, or I don't have to actively do anything. I just need to like absorb, and those are great days for that. But I couldn't do that if I wasn't self-employed. I couldn't do that if I had to go. Oh, I can't even imagine having to go be a certain place a certain time, for work anyway, every single day, and having to manage all that stuff. It's too hard.
And be checked in on what you're doing every minute of the day.
It's like, what are you wearing? Why aren't you going to lunch with us? All that sort of stuff that you find in proper jobs. That's really hard.
Yeah. So it's such a good route if people have a spark of what they want to do. And that's why I'm always saying to people, find out what you love and what lights you up, and then work for you, because there's no point going into an office each day, if it's doing you in sensory wise, expectation
I don't
wise.
even think I could go and do what I love. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine.
I don't think I could even go into an office and do what I love, because I realized through my work with the charity, I started doing training, and then I lit up. That was what lights me up. That is what lights me up. Training and speaking and writing, particularly training. I do really love it. I never would have known that if autism wasn't in my life. I would never have found that journey. I don't think I ever would have found that. But I think if I was hired as a 9-to-5 job to do training, I think I would hate it. It has to be on my terms. It has to be on my schedule. It has to be in the way I need to work. I don't think I could go into a 9-to-5 job doing that. I wouldn't love it anymore. It would probably kill me. Not kill me. It would kill off that love, really.
Yeah, because there's so much flexibility and freedom, and like you say, if you completely got no energy, then you kind of relax, and you couldn't do that in an office.
Exactly.
I used to go to work and think, I just need a 15-minute sleep. Where can I go and have a sleep? And it's like, now I just
overwhelming.
nip upstairs for a yoga nidra or something, or meditate.
Brilliant.
But so masking is a huge issue, isn't it? And I think this is, well, it's obviously why some of us go through an assessment and the psychologist's like, oh no, too sociable, making eye contact, those old myths, those cliches, they're still around, aren't they? Which is, I guess, why we're doing what we do, and we go out and train and say, look, this is
and we talk about it. Exactly. It's really important that there are people like us that are doing that and talking to the people who don't understand, because you don't understand unless it's in your life, to be fair.
Yeah, and I guess I have to be a bit more understanding of others, I guess. But so what is the impact of masking, do you think, for neurodiverse?
It's really hard, and masking is like really hot topic at the moment. Don't you notice? It's really, everyone's talking about masking, and a few new books have come out in the last year about masking and autism. And the thing about masking is, yes, it can be really detrimental. It can be completely exhausting. I mean, I know, like I mentioned earlier, I've fallen into relationships where I didn't really want to be in that relationship but I wanted to be in a relationship, and this was much younger, like 30 years ago, when I'm early 20s, teens, etc. But I would fall into a relationship, and then I would just become that person. I would take up all their hobbies, eat the food they like to eat. I didn't know that wasn't what you did. I didn't know that's what everybody did. I didn't know people didn't do that. I thought that was a totally normal thing to do until I realized I was autistic. So I did that lots of times, and that's had lots of marriages and lots of divorces. And I did that in jobs as well, where I would go into the job interview. I saw job interviews as like a wonderful game. I love job interviews. It's interesting, like your comedy improv stuff. I would go into the job interview, completely become what their dream employee, because I could read them, and I would become what their dream employee was, and I would obviously get the job, but then I couldn't do the job because I was just acting, it's really kind of cringe making now, but looking back on it, that was awful. So those are the sort of downsides of masking. Also, masking, particularly with children, is totally exhausting. If you have a child who's going into school and they're just being good, quote unquote, being good all day, and not addressing their own sensory needs, not looking after themselves, not asking for breaks, letting people jostle them around and dealing with the sensory overload and all those things, then that is very, very detrimental. Then you have a child who will come out of school, they've held it together all day, and they'll come out of school and they have what's called the Coke bottle, effectively, and will explode, either verbally or physically or both, to the parent who's collected them, or when they come home or whatever. But I think this idea that, well, we all have to unmask, we all have to not mask at all, I don't think that's the way forward. I think you have to harness masking, and to be honest, I'm 51 years old. I've masked so long, I don't always know when I'm doing it, to be honest. So it's just a natural, I suppose, survival strategy, defense mechanism, whatever you want to call it. That helps me, to be honest. And the downside of masking for me now as an adult is that's why people don't think I'm autistic and don't believe I'm autistic, because I'm, when on a professional level, I'm just masking quite a lot of the time. If I'm training, I'm masking. That's definitely, even though that's part of me, I'm still on, and I'm still being really friendly. I'm not friendly, but, friendly to a group of total strangers I've never met before, which wouldn't be normally my cup of tea at all. What am I trying to say? I guess I'm trying to say that there are positives and negatives of masking. And I think the idea of doing away with it altogether. I mean, to be fair, everyone masks, whether they're autistic or not. Everyone will put on a brave face to go into a meeting with their boss, or go to a party they're unsure about. I mean, everyone does that kind of stuff. So that in that context, you can see that there are positive things. I say masking can be quite a fake it till you make it thing, and that's not bad. That can be quite a useful thing. What do you think about masking? How do you find it manifest in your life?
Yeah, so I'm over the last 10 years since my diagnosis, I've just slowly started to find out who I truly am. I was a bit of a chameleon as well. I just remember working for this lovely organization, but because I had quite a bit of hyperactivity when I was younger, it seems to have dwindled off. But so I'd be like talking to everyone in the office. Really, I was kind of trying to just keep myself amused. But I looked really like sociable and like crazy sociable. Hi, how are you? And when I look back, I was like, God, that really wasn't me. I am friendly, of course I am, but not to that extent. And I was just like putting on this act. So now if I'm not feeling great, I don't feel I have to go and make small talk with everyone. I'm like, you know what? I know deep down I'm a good, friendly, caring person. I don't need to outwardly act like that to show you, so I've really started to think about my needs.
It's really important.
That's kind of what gets, I think you said about it earlier, you don't really think about your needs, you just become whoever you need to be in that moment.
And so sort of 40 years of my life kind of just zinging around from thing to thing, person to person, job to job, place to place, and now I feel like I've finally stopped that crazy whatever game that was, pinball game sort of thing, and like you said, finding out who am I, what do I like, and also there's no one in my life that I have to mask with at all, and I really kind of push against quietly spending time with people who I would need to do that with, and it's become kind of an active part of how I am in life. You know, if I'm in situations where I just don't fit with these people I'm working with, I'm going to kind of move on from this customer. You know, this isn't working for me, you know, because a lot of training I do, I just, as you know, you just kind of go and you do it and you come out again. But if you've got someone you have to have an ongoing relationship with, it has to work. And if it doesn't feel right for me, where in the past I would have said, oh, I've got to endure this, I'm just going to be nice and be a good girl, even though I'm a grown woman.
Yeah.
You know, I'll do that, and I don't anymore. I'm very, like you say, I think that's really interesting that you said that, because I'm feeling like that as well, that now is the time where I really have to pay attention to what I need.
Yeah.
Because we are people that give a lot to the world, you know, and your work and my work very different. Some of it's different, but you know, we do give a lot to the world, and we have to, it sounds like I'm being really high and mighty, I don't mean it, or arrogant, but you know, we have to look after ourselves in order to do that kind of work. You know, it is full on to talk to, you know, to do training. I know what you find, but I know if I do an hour training session, I can't do much the rest of the day. That wipes me out completely. Like full wattage. I always say it's like being electrified by the lights inside of a football stadium. It's that kind of like, whoa, you know, power, energy, and then then this Zoom session ends, and you're like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
can't do anything else. So I think that's really important part of masking, is knowing when to, well, I guess when to not do it, when it's not serving you. You know, it's one thing masking just in a very masking light, LITE, you know, where you're just kind of like getting through a conversation with someone. But if you've got to do that, if you're in a situation where you've got to do that day in, day out, that's never going to work, and that is not healthy at all.
Yeah, and then it leads to burnout and poor mental health. So just so great to learn how to manage ourselves, isn't it? And to have energy. Yeah, I do a 3 hour, I'm not doing it anymore, but I do a 3 hour online training, and yeah, literally I don't have anything else in that day because I'm just like laying down, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was I going to say? Gifts. So what gifts? Your world is autism. So what are some of the gifts you would
Yeah.
associate with autism?
Um, I think it's, you know, there's this myth that we have no empathy, that autistic people have no empathy, which is it is so false, because what I feel, certainly in myself, and I see it in my daughter as well, and my daughter and I, our autism is totally different. You know, if it is a spectrum, we are on opposite ends. We are totally different in our autistic way, but we both have tremendous empathy. And I know for myself, if it's not that I don't have empathy, it's that if something happens, it short circuits my brain, and I have to almost like put it in like an internal bomb-proof container and put it in the back somewhere, and then I have to leave it there until I can cope with it, until I can look at it. But what often happens, like if a friend's parent has died or something, I'll buy a sympathy card, and then I never send it, because I can't put those things together. It's too big for me to think about that my friend is traumatically upset about their pet or their parent, or something's happened in their lives. And so I tend to look like I don't care at all, when I actually am obsessing about how much I care. You know, I'm like hours and hours I've spent thinking about this parent with the pet or whatever's happened. So I think that empathy, but there's a positive, you know, there's a positive, there's a lesser thing, right? I can really, I suppose, I wonder if it's different for women than men. I understand that it is different, but I'm a woman, so I don't know if it's different. But I think women, we do more studying of other people, because I think when we're young, whether our parents taught us this or not, society tells us we need to be nice, never make fuss, smile all the time, be good. We need to be that way. So in order to be successful in that, when we're children, certainly, well, at any age, but mostly essentially, especially, I mean, when we're children, we have to study the other people. What are the other girls wearing? What are they doing? What smiles, what facial expressions do they have? How are they acting? And the plus side of that is that over time we can almost develop these like personas. So that type of person is that way, that type of person is that way, that type of person is that way. But also that type of person needs this, this type of person needs that. Like we just kind of, I think we end up with kind of a really deep intuitive sense about what other people are like. Now, maybe not everyone has it. I don't think every autistic person has this. And maybe it's unique to me. I don't know. but I do think that some of us do end up with this very, not only a deep empathy, but a real understanding of what different kinds of people are like, you know, and what different kinds of people need. I don't know if that made any sense at all. But for me, that's a gift.
That really resonates with me as well. I feel like I've always studied people, and if we're looking at, I don't like the term special interests, but passions from an autistic sense. I think one of my long-standing ones has been people and behavior, working out intellectually why they act the way they do, but also having that empathy as well, like sensing people's energy and their mood. So it's quite a lot to deal with. So no, I get why you sometimes package things away and put them in the back of your brain. Yeah.
I suppose it's that word empathic. Some of us are always say, I don't know that I would say that. I think in the past I might have said it about myself, but some people would say they're empathic, or they can read people's mood and read people's feelings. And I think for myself, it might be that was just too much for me. And I did do that when I was younger, and I took on so much. I was like a sponge, absorbing everyone's, including my parents as well, absorbing everyone's energy and everyone's upset and whatever. And I think I am almost consciously don't do that anymore, because it's too much for me. But I can understand people, and I can understand, and I can read people really quickly. If I meet someone, I can really read, like almost exactly, like I can, it's almost like, I say sometimes autistic people, this is a really weird analogy, bear with me. I say sometimes we're like, when you watch Terminator films, like I say, weird analogy, and the Terminator walks into a room, and there's all this data scrolling. He's got all this, like, who's in the room, what's in the room, where's the window, where's their food? We're doing that all the time. We have all this data scrolling all the time. And as I say, we're now Terminator, but it is like that. We're constantly looking like, what's going on in this room, who's here, what they're wearing, what am I wearing, the right thing, all this stuff's going on. But I think for me, that also means I can read people really well. Really quickly. I meet someone and there's all this data going on. Oh, he might go over this, and he works there, and he has this, and, his wife is whatever. There's all this stuff going on. And so I sort of take all that, and then my brain just sort of calculates a sort of like avatar. This is what this person is like. And that's quite helpful business wise. You get to know people quite quickly, more quickly than I think the average person would, if that makes sense. So other gifts, I think it's about, I know, maybe this is an age thing more than a gift, but I know I'm one of those people that people say, okay, you're good at everything you do. No, I only do things I'm good at. So I think it's finding out, like, really, I'm very efficiency, I would say, is a huge gift of autism for me. I'm super efficient. My daughter is this way as well. I really don't deal with any sort of life clutter. I am one of those people who, if I buy a dress, I get rid of a dress. I'm really like economical and efficient sort of that way. I think that's a real gift of autism. So when I say I only do things I'm good at, well, I'm never going to play golf, because I would be crap at golf, and it would take me so much time, and I wouldn't enjoy it. It would be a complete waste. So why would you really an efficient use of my time?
Yeah. So it's fascinating, isn't it? And you're kind of describing the kind of analytical mind, reading people, efficiency. I mean, there's so many. We could sit here all day talking about.
We really could, because I think there's ADHD gifts, and there's autism gifts, and they're kind of different gifts. I think the ADHD gift is just being able to be so prolific and being able to do a lot of things in a small space of time, and quite effectively as well, do them really well. I can write a training course and then do loads of business stuff, and just really do quite a lot. Wrote a 60,000 word book. I don't even know how I did that. That's quite amazing. Not everyone does that. I'm surprised myself, to be honest. But that is the ADHD side. It's that prolific. Although my brain jumps around from thing to thing, also I can focus. There are times when and especially if there's a deadline, I really need to focus. So like with my book, it took me like a year to write 30,000 words in 2 weeks to write the second. So literally, it's like, I don't even know if it was 2 weeks. I think it was like 10 days to write the second 30,000 words because I had the deadline. I had to get it done. And I think that's just what we're like. It's just part of our nature. But I think that's quite a good thing. It annoys other people if they say, right, your deadline is 6 weeks from now, and we do it in the last 4 hours before the 6-week deadline. It's just what we do.
And some people really struggle with that, don't they? And they fight against it and beat themselves up. Why can't I just spread it all out? And do you know what? If it works, it works. Sometimes you've got to go with it, don't you? It's working.
Really do.
Yeah.
You really have to go with it. And I think it's that just understanding that that's how your brain works. That's your brain doesn't work in a piecemeal way. And the reason, for me, certainly the reason that I can't do that is because I'm doing so many things all at once. If I say, okay, I've got 6 weeks to do this, I'll do this little 1/6 this week, the second 6, I can't do that because between doing the first 6 and the second 6, I would lose the plot entirely, and it would take me like an hour, maybe not an hour, but a good chunk of time. Like, what was I talking about? Where was I even going with this idea? I have to do it all in one piece. I can't do it bits and pieces. It just doesn't work for me. And I think that's why we're like that. We can't do it. But also, what people don't realize is that we're not doing anything. We're thinking. We have this project, it's due in 6 weeks' time. I always say it's almost like in my head, go back to things in my head, a lot of clutter in my head, clearly. I always say there's this little boardroom in my head, and these men or women, I always say in my head they're men anyway, where they're just talking about stuff, and I can drop in an idea and say, can you just talk about this amongst yourselves for like the next 6 weeks? And then I can check in, and they say, oh, we produced this idea for this project. And wow, that's amazing. Okay, I'm going to think about that for a while. And then I check in with them the next week. Oh, yes, and no, also this piece goes with that piece. So by the time I get to 6 weeks, but 4 hours before the deadline, it's a fully formed, complete thing in my head. I have been thinking about it all that time. I might not have done and nothing at all, but I've been thinking about it all that time, so I can sit down and just bash it out and it's done. That is an ADHD gift for sure.
Yeah, and you're right. It's all happening. It's processing. It's doing its thing. But because it doesn't look like you're doing something, people are, from the outside don't always get it, do they? But
no, my partner is not this way, and he's come to understand this is just what I'm like. That I don't. If I have a huge thing to do. In fact, I sort of think I feed on that deadline driven stuff. I think that fires me up, and I think it kind of keeps me going. And I always meet deadlines. I would never not meet a deadline. That's just completely out of my world. I wouldn't ever do that. But he's so not like this way. I think he's finally come to terms with it now. that he can trust that things are going to happen, that I'm going to do stuff, I'm going to be successful, it's going to be okay. But it took him a while because he's really not that way, and it makes him quite anxious, when things aren't not being done in a sort of linear kind of fashion. And neurodivergence, is not linear in any way, so
non-linear. So Kate, just to finish, final thoughts then, what advice would you give to somebody that's recently been diagnosed autistic, ADHD, or any other neurodivergence?
Be kind to yourself. I know for myself that certainly when I realized that I was autistic, it was like I was standing on top of a very tall hill or mountain looking down on my life, my past life, and it was like this carnage, and it's just like catastrophe and explosions and fire. Half the village was on fire. Like, I could look at my life, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I say to people? The people I hurt in relationships and jobs I messed up, and I was. And that was a really dark time. Fortunately, it didn't last for very long. I kind of pulled myself out of that. I could just I always sort of felt like I've never been an alcoholic, but I understand this is a thing with AA, where when you start AA, there's a point in time where you have to write letters of apology to people, And I sort of felt like I needed to do that, and I did do a bit of that actually when I realised I was autistic, and I don't think it made any difference at all. But I felt in myself I needed to apologise to people and say, I'm really sorry. I didn't know it's about myself and now I do, etc. But I would just say to be really kind to yourself when you have this information. It doesn't feel like a gift when you first understand this about yourself, but to be kind to yourself, do a lot of reading, do a lot of, I think the most important thing to do when you're an adult, you know, in your adult years, and you realize you are neurodivergent, is to listen to other neurodivergent people. There's heaps on YouTube and now TikTok, autistic adults and blogs, autistic adults talking, and adults with ADHD talking about their life experience. And there's podcasts like this one and others. And I think that kind of thing, listening to those things will help you feel not alone and help you feel like you're not kind of, I don't want to say crazy, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you're like quite a vast amount of the population, you know, around, they say around 20% of the UK workforce is neurodivergent in some way. You know, that's a lot, and that but I would say the population is a lot that's going to be higher, and it also doesn't include people who aren't diagnosed. So, you know, there's a lot of us out there, and a lot of us, more and more of us now, are talking like this and sharing our experiences. So the first thing you should do is sit down with your phone or your computer and start watching videos and start listening to podcasts, because it will help you feel a lot better. That would be my top advice, is to know that you're, first of all, be kind to yourself and be really compassionate to yourself. Understand that you did not know then what you know now. You didn't know then, and you have to forgive yourself for the things that happened, because you just didn't know. You didn't know what you were like. You didn't know what your brain was like. But again, you know, listening to other neurodivergent adults is going to be a gift to yourself.
Absolutely. Kate, thank you so much for coming along and talking about your experiences.
No, real pleasure. We could talk like 4 more hours, couldn't we? Really, it's a good topic to talk about.
Yeah, but great. Thanks so much for coming.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.